happens, right?
True, but you know, you got to have a good backup because if he
Yeah.
goes down, there goes that dream for a while. So,
Yep.
but I'm seeing several new names appearing. So welcome to all of you who are joining us. We are just chatting and getting closer to the 2 o'clock start time. So welcome to HomeNE April 2021 edition. So that's almost unbelievable. So Ashley, welcome. Joseph, I see a couple names popping in. So yeah, I think the chief's thought is he knows their system and he knows how to tutor and mentor Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, who knows? I'll have to read officially what they're doing. So Jennifer, welcome. So we're going to give it a couple more minutes. We have a good registration number, so I want to give everybody every opportunity, and it's not like they had to commute probably to join us. So we will give a couple more minutes opportunity. So anybody else want to throw something into our open space?
We are live on YouTube and we actually have somebody over there watching.
Yay, good. Dave, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I see your name has popped up. So we have as I mentioned, a good number of registrations. So we will get rolling here in a couple minutes. I saw the meme the other day that only Nebraskans talk about mowing their yard before the snow flies tomorrow, and my husband could relate to that. He mowed last weekend and now it's going to snow tomorrow possibly. So Cassie, welcome. And a big welcome to all of you who've joined us as I am looking at your logins. So
I think we should be talking about all those Rural Workforce Housing Award recipients. That is so awesome. Yeah. Twin Cities Development, Scottsbluff, Morrill, and Kimball counties, Keith County Housing in Keith County, Moquett Economic Development covering Red Willow County, Cozad, Cumming County, Schuyler, North Platte, Columbus, Pender, Seward, Gothenburg, Grand Island, Aurora, and Crete. That's awesome.
Yay. We should give them a high five virtually and in person. So
yeah,
that's a lot of work and a lot of opportunity that's now coming their way. So thank you for sharing that, Sharon. So
I'm excited to see all the projects that were planned with that.
Yes, and many, if not all of those communities have been represented on a HomeNE webinar, either as a participant or a speaker. So that's doubly exciting. Feels like Old Home Week. So, well, be sure and let us know that you're here as you continue to log in. If you have something on your mind, put something in the chat box. But as we're getting close to 2 o'clock, we aren't able to acknowledge everybody. So I just want to take a moment before we get underway to recognize our partners at the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for their financial investment and support of our HomeNE Learning Network. I speak for everyone here at South Central Economic Development District when I say thank you and express our appreciation to the department and their staff for their ongoing support. So I think I want to go ahead and just honor everybody's time and get started with today's HomeNE webinar. A reminder to all of you who are attending, we are streaming on our YouTube channel. So, and as Sherry just mentioned, somebody's already on there watching us. But if you do encounter difficulties with Zoom, feel free to switch over to our YouTube channel and watch from there. So, so let me just officially say welcome and good afternoon. My name is Lori Ferguson and I'm with South Central Economic Development District here in Holdridge. And thank you for joining us today. Our HomeNE webinar continues to expand across the state. And many of you have been faithful in making the learning network that we call HomeNE a meaningful and growth-oriented movement across the state. Each and every month we have new first-time registrations. So to those of you who are new today, we say thank you for making this hour of your day a priority. We know firsthand that many things can scream for our attention. So thank you for making HomeNE a priority. And to those of you who regularly participate, you are equally valuable to us. So thank you for your continued investment and participation in this learning network. So whether this is your first time here or one of many webinars that you've attended, we welcome all of you here today. So today we have the pleasure of hearing from Andrew Willis of Klein, Williams, Wright, Johnson, and Oldfather. Andrew, you might correct me, but I was on your website. It says that this is a law firm practicing. It began in 1857 before Nebraska was actually a state. We were a territory. And today there are offices located in Nebraska and Colorado. So I'm seeing a nod of affirmation. So my data is correct. So before we formally introduce Andrew to you, I encourage you to be thinking of questions for him. And feel free to use the chat box to post your questions. We will be monitoring that as you respond, and we will share your comments and questions with our presenter later in the webinar. So we like to capture your thoughts. So we want to know before we begin today, what interests you about today's topic and what do you want to know more about at the end of today's webinar? So please put your answers to those questions in the chat box as well. So HomeNE is a learning network, as I shared earlier, and we learn best when we learn together and interact and engage. So please share your thoughts. And at this time, I'm going to turn this over to Sharon Heffley. She is the Executive Director here at South Central Economic Development District.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our April edition of the HomeNE 2021 webinar series. South Central Economic Development serves as the lead agent for this learning network, and we are glad that you are here. HomeNE is designed for people from all across Nebraska seeking to successfully address our housing challenges. HomeNE's purpose is to build a network of individuals and communities with a shared interest in assessing and addressing housing issues in rural communities. We want to provide a safe space where things can be discussed. We can talk about what's been tried, what's found to work and not work, and take that step in the right direction, to learn from the successes and struggles of others, and to take away new ideas or see things through a new lens. We want to also inspire you, because you are the ones that can inspire your tribe, and what you do in your community is very important. I want to add that we also want to know, those of you that are participating here and consuming the information that Andrew will be providing today, we want to hear back when you become a producer with that information. So let me tell you a little bit about Andrew. I am excited to have him here. This is the first time we've met. Welcome. He's worked with our office before, but I wasn't privileged to be the one. Andrew is a partner, like Lori said, with Klein, Williams, Wright, Johnson, and Oldfather LLP. His practice focuses primarily on real estate transactions, including real estate development, zoning and land use matters, tax increment financing, low-income housing tax credits, and other tax credit projects, and real estate financing. So, having been a beneficiary of his fine work, welcome, Andrew, and the floor, or the screen, I guess, is yours.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I guess to start off, I would say that a very large part of my practice is dealing with tax increment financing and the related sort of economic development that that's ancillary to that, but primarily TIF. And we represent multiple communities across the state, from villages to cities of the first class. We also represent developers working on the opposite side. So I've seen and worked on a lot of different projects I'm not, I would say, it used to be more of a, commercial. We do a lot more commercial projects, but recently it's been a lot of housing. And I'm not saying anything that, nobody in this audience, it's not news to anybody in this audience that there's, it's a particularly difficult time to create housing in Nebraska, particularly rural Nebraska, where just construction costs are going up. It does not appear, there's no sign that this is a problem that's going to end. It still is the problem, and TIF is one of the tools, one of the few tools in the economic development toolbox that we can use to at least help assist with residential development in the state. So as I go through this, we've seen a lot, and I've worked on a lot of projects where we're really talking about new subdivisions and bringing in a residential subdivision where you're building out that infrastructure, and that's one residential project. But really, in this presentation, I want to focus on a different aspect, and that's as I say, this infill housing, kind of the creative approach where the CRA is looking at maybe a single lot that's in town, and less of the kind of new subdivision approach and more of this one-off, well, hopefully not one-off, hopefully reproduced over and over, but single lot infill developments, and how the CRA can really facilitate housing through this process. So that's, I guess, kind of the example I want to share. There's lots of different ways to do this, but hopefully it will at least be a good example and create an example we can use going forward. Let's see if I can make sure my slides going forward. There we go. Okay. I guess just as starters, I'm going to use the term CRA, CDA. I'm going to use CRA. We can use those terms interchangeably. I know that some communities have a CRA, some have a CDA. Doesn't really matter for the purpose of this. Happy to answer any questions about the TIF process. There's a lot of steps we're not addressing today in this presentation. To get to our specific topic of this infill housing example, I'm going to assume that a lot of these prerequisites have been met, and that a lot of these steps have taken. So, for example, in order to to have a project, I'm assuming that for our example, that the city has established a CRA, that part of the community has been declared blighted and substandard through the community development law process, and that the project site, our proposed site, is in that redevelopment area, that blighted and substandard area. Now, for anybody who I hope haven't lost anybody yet, but again, if those steps have not been taken in your community, or that that's maybe the initial steps still need to be taken, then we probably should have a different conversation offline. But again, for the purpose of this, we're assuming that there's at least the framework for TIF set up in the community, and perhaps there's been a few TIF projects done, but at this point, the question, so the CRA has been developed, they've been established, we have members on the board, they've probably met a few times, and now we're looking at how they can, and if not, we can get there, by creating that CRA. But again, the main thing here is that we're going to have a redevelopment area that's declared blighted and substandard, and a project site, and a lot in that site that's available for this project. Because if it's not in that redevelopment area, if it's not been set up, then it's not eligible for TIF. So I'm already making some big assumptions, but for the purpose of our project, we need to make those assumptions, and that exists. Now, I already start off by saying, what can the CRA do beyond the typical redevelopment project? And typical is probably a misnomer here, because there really is no such thing as a typical project. But as I mentioned, 10 years ago, I would have said, it's primarily commercial development. And but that's really changed. We're doing a lot of residential projects, a lot, utilizing TIF for residential. Obviously, the legislature has seen the need for that too, with the workforce housing bill and some of these other changes they've made to the community development law. But again, even within the residential TIF, I would say more often we see TIF being used for new subdivisions where you have to bring out that infrastructure. You got to build out the street, extend the water line, whatever those are, in order to really, it's part of the replatting to create the buildable lots. I mean, that makes more sense since TIF generally is used to pay for those eligible public improvements. And by using TIF in a subdivision project like that, you may bring down those lot values by $30,000 or so and really create an affordable lot. And so that's, even, I guess, where we'd see that really driven by developers and builders and where they can really utilize TIF to help their development out. But again, here, what I want to focus on is sort of that next step or that additional project where the CRA says, okay, we don't have this large vacant tract of land. We don't have a developer who wants to come in and build even 10, 12 lots. We've got, but we still need housing. We still need housing in our community, and we need new houses. Well, we've got a lot in the middle of town. Perhaps it's vacant, but but it's on a street. The infrastructure is there. We have a lot, and perhaps maybe it's a dilapidated house that's not inhabitable anymore, but exists. But it's not an area ripe for a subdivision. But we've got a couple lots that we could utilize. But again, the cost of construction is so high that it's just not feasible for a builder to come in without any assistance and build a house there. It happens to be in our redevelopment area, so that's where the opportunity lies for the CRA to create this project. So that's so we're finally getting around to that. But to answer what can we do with that? What can the CRA do to help, or how can we create this project? We need to start with what the power and the authority of the CRA is. It's very broad. This is just a few points taken from the community development law. There's a lot more, but for our purposes, this is just a few of the selections. As you can see, the CRA has the ability to prepare redevelopment plans, to undertake and carry out projects, to purchase real property, to hold it, to improve it, to clear it, and to prepare it for projects, to sell or transfer that property, to enter into contracts with redevelopers containing covenants and restrictions, dealing with the use of the property, to demolish structures that are existing on the property if they're unsafe or unfit, and to make any expenditures that are necessary to carry out redevelopment projects. I'd also note that the community development law a couple times in two different sections talks about how these provisions should be liberally construed. It doesn't mean that we should try to push the limits. The idea here is that these same statutes apply in every size community from Omaha to O'Neill. And so it's really supposed to allow for each community to take these laws and say, what will help us best? How can we use this in our own situation to create the best project that will be best for our community? So again, this framework sets up really what we need. So at a minimum here, we've got, and again, there's a lot more that the law provides, but here we've got the CRA can acquire property, demolish structures on it, prepare that site for development, improve the property, sell the property, impose covenants and contracts for the use of that property, all as part of a project. So that gives, that's pretty broad authority to help create a project. So with that framework, that's our authority, and that's what we need to be able to do to keep this for this infill project. So finally to our project, and again, as I mentioned, our concept here is we've got, perhaps there's, it's not a developer coming in because there's a large tract of land they can use, but we do have some empty lots in town, or perhaps some dilapidated homes. And so this is really the CRA's ability to leverage those lots and tax increment financing to help facilitate builders creating new homes. It's, again, a little bit proactive on the CRA side, and so, but it allows, but I say proactive, but also ensuring that the CRA or the community doesn't have to take all of the risk. that they take the appropriate amount of risk or the appropriate amount of buy-in in order to create the lot that the developer can then come in, the builder can then come in, build the home, and again, they can take on the right amount of risk. And that's where that partnership really lies. Essentially, as we'll see in this concept, where a CRA can come in and cover that initial cost, site acquisition, site preparation, excuse me, to ultimately be reimbursed through the TIF, but that will get the lot to that will reduce the overall cost to get to that lot where even with the high construction costs, it is feasible for a builder to build. And that's where it's a win-win. We have got new housing. The developer can do it without, and make the profit they need to make. The community gets new housing, and the CRA will get repaid. The goal is the CRA will be repaid through the TIF. So my slides here are going through, the kind of the logistics of how this will work very broadly. Again, each of these is going to be different. There's going to be a lot of specifics. Ultimately, there's going to be a redevelopment agreement in place between the CRA and the builder, either developer, whether that's a for-profit builder, a nonprofit who's running this project, whatever that is, they're the redeveloper in this project. And there's going to be this contract in place that really identifies the details of it. But generally speaking, and how this works or has worked before is CRA either has a lot or has identified a lot that meets those criteria I've mentioned. It's in the redevelopment area, it's either vacant, or perhaps there's a house that needs to be demolished because it's uninhabitable. But we've located a potential project site. The CRA is going to need to acquire that property through purchase or otherwise. And if it needs to be rezoned, if it needs to be replatted, the idea is that the CRA can handle all of that stuff and really get it ready for development. And then if any site preparation, preliminary work needs to be done, that would include the demolition of our structure that's existing on there. If there's maybe any soil, dirt work that needs to be done, whether that's grading, compaction, whatever that is, to get that ready. Also, as we mentioned, the CRA can improve this property. And so as part of this project negotiation, the details, the question is going to be, how do we, again, it's based on construction costs and what we're trying to create here, what we're trying to build, but what needs to be done to make this actually work for the builder? Do they need to pour the foundation? Do they need help out in that way? Whatever that improvement needs to be done so that the values work out here. But ultimately, that's what we're trying to accomplish, get the CRA so we have a pad ready site, developable, ready to be built upon. Now, obviously, that requires upfront cost. And there's no way around that there's money that has to be spent there. But again, the goal here is that through the TIF process, that will all be repaid back over the 15-year TIF period. It's over time, but again, still will be repaid. We'll get back to that, the payment and the concept there. And that's where this is really the key to this, making this work, is the CRA then sells the site to the redeveloper, but I'll use quotes on sells, because while they need to sell it for fair value, in this example, there's no money that's being exchanged. It's more like a seller carryback. So the TIF over the 15-year period, that's going to be the payment of that purchase price. So again, CRA is getting their purchase price over time. Builder doesn't have to pay that initial cost, and that's where we really, again, are trying to create a feasible construction cost. So at that point, our CRA has sold the property to our builder, and with the carryback and the idea that they will be paid that purchase price through the TIF. So the redeveloper then has to do their part. They build that home. That's the main thing. Get that home created to create that value, that incremental value that will pay off the TIF. This is where a lot of the we'll talk about, details of this and what we're trying to build. And a lot of this depends on the community. Is it a minimum size? Is it a maximum price? If we're trying to keep, build affordable housing, whatever that is, will be defined in the contract, but the redeveloper will need to build the desired end result, the private improvements, the home that will create the value. And then there'll be, redeveloper has to either sell that off if it's meant to be rental, they'll rent it out, but they'll ultimately be paying the taxes on that new home, and that's what pays back the CRA. So again, as part of the redevelopment agreement, this would all be laid out in that redevelopment agreement, that contract that's in place. As I mentioned, a lot of that agreement is going to be defining these very specifics, and it depends on what, a lot of it is, what the problem we're trying to solve is. Is it a minimum investment by that redeveloper where we just need housing in the community? So as long as they're putting in, they've agreed to put in a minimum investment as construction, then we're going to get to the end goal. Perhaps part of it's, the anticipated completion value we want to create. It might be we need to create a home of at least some value if we're doing that, or if we're really focusing on affordable housing or workforce housing, maybe it's that there's going to be a maximum sales price at the end of this. So you're not going to be able to sell it for more than whatever that's agreed upon. Obviously, that changes the economics a lot, but that's all part of the contract. And again, making sure we're solving the correct problem. Timing's an important part here, and just making sure, making sure that we know we've got the timing figured out. Part of this is, and I'll tell you, in one case where we've implemented this approach, part of the logistical question is, okay, redeveloper, the CRA is going to be doing their initial work, then selling the house or selling the lot so that the developer can then build this house. Well, logistically, that may not work out in steps, sequentially A, B, C. So how do we make sure that everybody's working together if, for example, there needs to be a conveyance first while the CRA is still doing some of the work? If part of that is, preparing the footings and foundations, and that needs to be done, if it can be done in unison, it still is CRA's responsibility and redeveloper responsibility separated, but working together. And so, just figuring out the logistics of it, which may look different in different projects. But again, addressing all those specifics through that redevelopment agreement to get to what we've kind of just in broad strokes described as sort of the CRA's role to get this to pad ready, and then the redeveloper creating that home on top. One of the major things, obviously, so we've talked about being, the CRA being repaid through the TIF. So, the TIF itself is important to look at and understand. I always look at the TIF from both sides, kind of both sides of the equation, the sources of TIF and the uses of TIF, because we need to know both. We need to know the eligible uses, because it has to be eligible uses under state law, but also we need to know the sources of TIF, because if not, because that's what's going to be the payment back. I see a question.
Yes, Kelsey wanted to know if a city or village owns the lot, what is the process to transfer that to the CRA?
Great question, because it's actually, so there's certain obligations.
My video's not on because I'm just sitting here.
Well, we should,
Yeah.
I've seen some of them stand up and they got their underwear on.
Themselves. We've got an open microphone somewhere. Check your mute. Andrew, do you want to go ahead and address the question?
Yeah. Let me. So it actually, for the city to transfer to the CRA, it actually is. It can be done a lot simpler than the CRA, the city selling land otherwise. There's no remonstrance period. There's nothing that the city usually has to go through. And so it can be done, resolution by the city agreeing to sell, resolution by the CRA agreeing to purchase, and then a deed. It's actually a much simpler process. And I would definitely recommend, as part of this, if the city owns that property, it's much easier to have a redevelopment project utilizing TIF to first transfer that property to be titled into the CRA or the CDA, rather than having it be city property that then sold to a developer. It's a lot easier and it's a lot cleaner. So that's, I mean, it's a really good question, but I've always recommended everybody to get that land titled into the CRA first, to make the project and the redevelopment project go a lot smoother. So yeah, it's a simple it's a lot simpler than the city disposing of land otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So and again, so this next couple slides try to really break down the idea of the TIF on one of these projects. So again, we look at both the uses and the sources and the uses. The uses is fairly easy. We want to make sure they're eligible costs, and there's certain costs that are eligible under state law. And again, that's why in sort of a subdivision process, you're talking about streets, you're talking about bringing out those utilities. But in this project, we already have those utilities, and we've just got this lot. One of the eligible costs is site acquisition costs. So site acquisition costs, site preparation costs, all those pieces that we've in this example, I guess, allocated to the CRA. And then the redeveloper is going to pay that purchase price. Remember, they're not actually paying it, but they're going to, like a carryback note, there's going to be a TIF note where the CRA is repaid that purchase price for any costs, really all those costs. And that site acquisition for the redeveloper should encompass all of the CRA's costs for acquisition of the site, or any preparation work. Really, all of that work should be part of the purchase price. And since that's so really that's the entire eligible cost, is the purchase price. So it actually looks simpler from a certification perspective and everything else, but all of the CRA's costs that are eligible, which is really everything they've done in our example, should be part of the purchase from that will be repaid through TIF. So we have an amount, whatever that is. That might be $30,000, that might be $40,000, it might be a lot more, but we have an amount. So then the question is, okay, we can say as much as we want to be repaid back, but if this repayment is supposed to happen from the TIF, so that'd be from that tax increment, we got to figure out how much tax increment there's going to be over 15 years. So in this example, and again, it's going to change a lot for every time, but we're going to assume we're really trying to create affordable housing here. Maybe this example is not even realistic anymore to have a house for $180,000 because of where construction costs are, but we're going to assume we have a $10,000 lot, and the CRA's goal is to create some good affordable housing for kind of entry-level housing at $180,000. For the sake of my easy math, we're going to use a 2% tax levy, and then the interest rate, if the CRA has to take out a loan for all these costs up front, 5%. So that's just our scenario here to see how much TIF we can get off of a single lot residential project. Let's see. Okay. So again, here's the math breakdown of that example. With a $10,000 base value, that's your lot value, and then you build a house that's assessed at the end at $180,000. Again, we'll say it's sold for $180,000, and it just worked out perfectly. And our 2% tax levy, you'd see that I see a typo there. I got a couple typos in here, so I apologize for that. But that's a $200 base value tax, not $2,000 on 10,000. So, but then the taxes on that $180,000 home are about $3,600. And so what you do is you take that $3,600, the completed value, minus the base value, which should be $200, and that gets us our incremental value of $170,000, the difference, the value created, but also the tax increment, which is the $3,400. So that $3,400 per year, which is completed taxes minus the base taxes, which should be $200. So we now have $3,400 coming in each year for 15 years. So the basic math, $3,400 times 15 years, $51,000. So we have $51,000 of TIF. Now, again, if the CRA has to borrow money up front in order to buy that land or to demo that house and do whatever they have to do, and we'll say the loan value, the loan cost is 5%. So we got an interest rate of 5%. So the debt service on a 5%, with a 5% loan over 15 years, $36,000. So they can get a $36,600 loan that can be repaid back with $3,400 per year. So again, with assuming all those numbers work out, we can look at it in two different ways from the CRA's side as they're making this initial investment. And they can be paid back $51,000 total over that 15-year period, or the value of $36,000 that they spend day one, and with the time value of money, they're being repaid for that $36,000. So again, for this, we're going to say they had to take out a loan. So we're really looking at they can reasonably put a $36,000 investment in with the right covenants, making sure they get that money, that on a $180,000 house, they should be repaid back over 15 years. Graphically, for the visual folks out there, this is what that looks like. Again, the $10,000 base value is this, I guess, reddish color. And so we start out, this is our empty lot before a project is created at all. We have $10,000 in value. So they're getting, $200 in taxes are being paid each year. We start our project, we enter into our redevelopment agreement. The CRA does their work, sells the property. Builder builds a house that sells at $180,000 or is assessed at $180,000. So again, our base value, this $200 in taxes or $10,000 in value for the entire 15-year period, that amount is still just paid out as it normally would be, to each taxing jurisdiction. Our green here which is, the $170,000 of assessed value, or the $3,400 in taxes, that amount, each of those 15 years, goes to pay back the CRA, goes to pay that purchase price, which again is all of the CRA's investment. So that's kind of, and then in year 16, then they've been paid back, or it's a 15-year TIF period. And then in year 16, then again, we've created the entire valuation there, and that entire value, all $180,000 and the taxes on it, that goes to the, is allocated out to each taxing jurisdiction as it normally would. So that's I guess the graphic interpretation of what we just said. But again, the idea there is we've got $36,000, and the CRA can make that $36,000 investment up front and reduce the cost to help make this to help create a buildable lot. I have 5 more bullet points that I want to kind of go over as other considerations. We'll go over them real quick. As part of this type of single lot redevelopment project. And again, there's no right or wrong answer to these. These are going to be addressed differently by different communities, and even by the same community in different circumstances. But things that kind of should be thought about as part of this redevelopment project. Covenants and restrictions. I've mentioned this several times already. I mean, part of this is just figuring out what the problem that we're trying to solve. So is it just we need additional housing? We need new houses, in which case you're probably not worried. You're not worried about maximum prices. Maybe you don't care. As long as we can get houses, that's great. If we're trying to create workforce or affordable housing, that's a different problem and a tougher problem because of construction costs. But depending on what that problem is, the CRA or the city is going to be thinking about different restrictions, different covenants that are part of this redevelopment agreement. Again, you may have a maximum sales price in there. You won't sell it for more than, you'll build something that you won't sell for more than $200,000 or $250,000 or whatever it is. I think NYFA's actual, the workforce housing limit is like $275,000 right now. So maybe that's your number. Maybe it's 275, whatever that number is, and it can be different in different situations. But again, you may put that as the covenant on the builder. If it's a rental, if you're trying to create rental, you need rental units in the community. So are there any restrictions beyond that it's going to be a rental? Is it, is there is it trying to be affordable rent, or do you care? I mean, those are just, we don't know. I mean, it's going to depend. And so that's, I guess part of it is just, the question, figuring out what we're trying to solve, and then putting the right restrictions in place based on that. So the next one is that I want to go back to this point of fair value. And this is getting that fair value of what the CRA's put in. So we care about fair value for two reasons. We care about it because the statute says the CRA has to sell property for fair value, and also because they want to be repaid whatever they've put in. Here's the statutory definition, and notice it's not fair market value, it's fair value. And so you're allowed to take into account not only just, it's not like it's a pure appraisal of the value of that property, it also takes into account any restrictions, any covenants you put into place. So we've seen projects, I've done projects where the CRA, the CDA will ultimately be, giving away lots. And you think, well, that's not, there's obviously value to the lots, but they're giving them away only with the obligation that you build certain sized home, and then the CRA gets that TIF back. So again, you can take into account those restrictions and whatever requirements you're going to put on place. If you're requiring affordability and you're requiring that the developer reduce the sales price that they can get, then perhaps it's, that really reduces the value of the land. Again, it's going to be very specific, but again, I want to just mention that there is a statutory requirement that we at least consider what that fair value is, but also, the main goal here is to make sure everybody is reimbursed, and so the CRA gets their value back through the TIF. So the payment in lieu of tax, again, here, this is just risk assessment. So one thing, if we've billed out our projected TIF amount to repay the CRA based on an estimated final value. We don't know what that's going to be until the county assessor actually assesses it. So what happens if it's less? Who bears that risk? It's going to, and the answer is, I guess it depends on what's decided. Maybe the CRA is comfortable that they can bear the risk, and that we generally know with housing kind of where it's going to fall. If you have a minimum investment that's required or something like that, it's probably less risky, I would say, than maybe a commercial project, where we usually see the requirement of a redeveloper have a payment in lieu of taxes, where if there's a shortfall, the redeveloper's paying it. But again, that might be something to consider. Who's bearing the risk if it comes in at a less value than anticipated? And probably less likely with single family homes, because you can kind of gauge where they're going to be based on what's required to be built. But again, is there a requirement that there's a payment in lieu of taxes, or is the CRA willing to accept that risk? Something to consider. I bring up the 15 versus 20 years of TIF only because now, the newly minted law that does allow for 20-year TIF in certain circumstances, if there's an area that's extremely blighted. Now, that's a different that's a different analysis. It has nothing to do with the project. It has to do with the area that's extremely blighted. And again, we can talk about that separately, but I only want to bring this up because, again, since we're talking about how much TIF can be, how much the CRA can expend and get repaid back, I just noted, using our same example we used before, $180,000 home on a $10,000 base value lot, we had, on a 15-year TIF, we had a total TIF of $51,000 and the present value of that at $36,600. If it's an extremely blighted area and you can use 20 years of TIF, all of a sudden, instead of $51,000, we're talking about $68,000 of TIF, and the present value of $42,700. So again, if it meets the requirements, if there is an extremely blighted area and a bigger investment's required, that 20-year TIF obviously can create more value in TIF. And I guess just, the last point that's also worth mentioning is, great, we're bringing in new housing, we're kind of lowering that value, that barrier of, construction costs, but then we just want to be cognizant of any overall effects on the community, right? So our goal here is not to create cheap housing necessarily. Our goal is not to create a discounted, an ability for a home buyer to buy a discounted house. Our goal is to sell a $225,000 house for $225,000. The problem is that I guess what we would consider a $225,000 house may right now cost $270,000 to build or whatever that is. And the thought is, well, then that becomes a $270,000 house. Well, not really. That's our problem. That's our problem we're solving. But we don't. I bring this up because we don't want to get in a situation where CRA is providing this benefit so that a nonprofit doing a great thing and a wonderful thing, bringing in housing, can sell it cheap. That may potentially have that it's a market rate normal, not market rate house that's sold cheaper that brings down other values, because that's not really the goal of the rest of the community. We want to right size everything. It's worth noting here as I say this, the but-for test for a redevelopment project, but for TIF, this wouldn't happen. Part of the analysis of making sure a TIF project works doesn't say you can't make money. Nobody's going to build a house without making any profit, and that's okay. It's okay for a builder to make profit. But for TIF, everybody should still make a profit. Meaning, and my point being, again, our $225,000 house should still sell for $225,000. And again, if our purpose is affordability, we're putting extra covenants in place, that would naturally reduce the cost, but that's the goal, and that changes the market. Anyway, at least again, it's worth considering as you think about these projects and bringing in this housing. That really, again, you're trying to right size everything, and we're dealing with a situation now where construction costs don't allow that to naturally happen, and that's where the CRA can really help out in this project. So with that, I know that's a lot of information very quickly. And I'm happy to answer. Hopefully that at least gives one example of kind of a creative way that the CRA can really step up and be proactive and help out to form this, I guess, not really a partnership, but I'm calling it a partnership to help create housing. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about my example or any other TIF related questions that I've raised.
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. Lots of great information. We do have a question in the chat box, and I encourage all of you to add your questions. A lot of information provided, hopefully some scenarios going in your minds as you heard Andrew speaking. But we have a question that if foundations and or pad ready sites are eligible expenses, would the underground private sewer, water, electric, gas lines, etc. to the home also be an eligible expense?
Good question. Yeah, because in a normal, I guess I would say in a normal, again, I'm using normal, which I probably shouldn't, but a typical project where you have a redeveloper coming in and they're paying for everything. Yeah, we would normally say that those are not TIF eligible costs, and neither the foundation wouldn't be either. The difference here is again, as I mentioned that statute earlier, the CRA has the ability to improve this property and get it to a place where it can sell. And so our theory on this is that because this site, this vacant lot, or perhaps with the dilapidated home on it, it just can't be sold and built up otherwise. So that's why they're doing that work. And so in this case, I would say that the CRA putting in those costs would be an eligible cost in this very specific type of project where the CRA is paying for all of that and they're being reimbursed. It's different than if a developer is doing it. And so I feel comfortable. I think that I'm correct on that, because again, that's what the statute says. And the purpose here is that our that but-for test, the idea is this lot can't be developed without the CRA putting in their cost, that public cost first. So that's a great question, because it is a little different than I definitely would tell a developer if they came in just to do a project. But hopefully that explains my theory there.
Sure. And I may need some clarification on this. I'll read the question. What if there is a CRA that has some pushback on this approach to helping with the housing need? I don't know if they're receiving pushback or if they have some pushback themselves about this approach. So, but yeah, what would you say to that question?
The place where I mean, as far as, like opposition or pushback just from the general community, the place where we typically see it, if there is any, is kind of either from the school district or from that thought process, is that you're adding homes to the community that are going to be off the tax rolls essentially for 15 years. And so how does that affect the school district? And that, I mean, there's the reason why, as part of any project, you provide notice specifically to the school district, and you should at least consider that as a cost benefit analysis. So I mean, that's probably where we see the most pushback. And I mean, it needs to be addressed, but I know that's just part of working through the community.
So there is a clarification. The redeveloper is receiving pushback from the CRA.
Okay. Oh, as far as what? Yeah. So the trying to negotiate this project on what the CRA is willing to pay for. I mean, that's ultimately negotiation. It's going to depend on. I would say it depends on a couple of things. Again, we have to look at both our TIF sources and our TIF uses. Part of it's going to be how much TIF is created. Part of it's going to be, I guess, how much the CRA is just willing to do. Everything in the community development law and all redevelopment projects are, I mean, there's nothing mandatory about it. The CRA can say we don't want to do any. It would be not a very good CRA, I suppose, but they could. So if they're saying we're only willing to pay for X, Y, Z, I mean, part of that, that ultimately comes down to the but-for test. So a developer might need to say, look, and provide more information. Some communities we work with really want more financial information or a pro forma, and you say, no, here's how exactly this works out. And if I'm going to build this house, it costs this much. And so, then that's part of the negotiation analysis, but really it ultimately has to be, but for TIF, I can't do this project, and what the CRA is willing to pay for.
Okay, thank you. Because of the technical nature of some of this, if you are comfortable opening your microphones to ask Andrew some questions, feel free to do so. We do have a couple more questions I'm going to run by you, Andrew.
Yep.
A developer requests that the CRA cover the infrastructure costs, but their housing development on the property will take place over multiple years. How do you reduce the risk? That's the first question. And second question, what are some strategies for guaranteeing that the property will be developed as planned?
Okay. So yeah, dealing with, I'll take the second part first. Some ways to guarantee that. What we've done is, okay, so if the CRA is saying we're going to put in this investment up front, and you have then you have to do your part, to maybe eliminate some of that risk, is to have a repurchase option, so that the CRA has the ability to repurchase that site if the redeveloper doesn't do what they said they would do. It still means that the CRA's put in that money, but it's at least then you have the ability then to take that and hopefully find another builder or something like that. So we've done that before. The guarantee, the payment in lieu of tax, the guaranteed minimum payment. So if you have a redeveloper and you put in there that payment in lieu of tax obligation in the redevelopment agreement, where essentially there's, let's use that $180,000 example because it's easier math. So they say the CRA it's going to cost, we need $3,400 back each year for 15 years to be repaid. So redeveloper, you're obligated. Anything short of that, you have to pay us. So if they build nothing, they've created zero increment, they owe the CRA $3,400 every year for 15 years. If you have that in the contract, you still have to enforce the contract. There still is, going through the legal process, but you have a contractual obligation, and most people don't want, to have to pay $3,400 for nothing each year. So that payment in lieu of tax is a way to lower that. To at least address the risk. Personal guarantees, typical lending type of things as well. As far as a project being built over multiple years, the community development law does allow for phasing of projects. And so you can have, separate phases, different effective dates for the TIF for different areas and lots within a project. And that's, I guess that's more on where you have a larger subdivision. Wouldn't be necessarily on an infill house by house basis, but I mean, so you can either not approve, you can only, maybe the CRA only approves phase 1 by phase 2, phase 3 in order, so that you've completed phase 1 first before the next one, or something like that. And I suppose, I mean, that's part of it. Part of it is just making sure the CRA can get their full investment back by timing the effective dates right on the division of taxes. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay. Well, we've got another one for you. What are your
Okay.
thoughts on blighting a cornfield by finding some adjacent blighted area to attach to it?
Sounds a lot like the city of Hastings case from, I forget what year that was, where the Supreme Court said you can't do that. So there's two things you can, I mean, in order to have a blighted area, you need to meet the blight and substandard requirements. As part of the blight and substandard requirements, you can have vacant property. So there, in any blighted area, there's going to be vacant area. But what you should not do is you should not blight a cornfield with a house next to it and call that the blighted area. That Hastings case I mentioned, where that was pretty much what happened, the Supreme Court said you can do one of two things. You can meet the, and actually what they did was they just added a cornfield to an already blighted area, but you can either meet the blight and substandard requirements for the area, or it has to be you have to show that it's reasonably necessary to add that area for a project. I mean, so I think that's probably a longer conversation, but I guess I would say you probably shouldn't do that. How about that?
Okay, sounds good. And I know that you are always available for people to reach out. You've got your contact information there on the screen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we'll be also providing it here shortly. So, but we are approaching our 3 o'clock time, but if you have another question or two, feel free to add those to the chat box as we conclude here. We will gladly pass those on to Andrew as well. But I do want to just update you on a previous webinar that we had back in August of 2020. We featured the Village of Ansley and their newly formed investment club at the time. If you remember a little bit, they had had some disappointment. They had not received some funding that they had applied for as part of the Custer County group to renovate the hotel in downtown Ansley, but they took that disappointment and turned it into a progress. They formed an investment club in the community, and at the time of the webinar, they were working as busy bees trying to complete their first spec home that they had already received and accepted a contract on. So we told you about that, and we shared during that webinar the information. You see the two pictures there in the center of the next site that they were going to be developing, and at that point in time it had just been demoed. Well, late last month I got the opportunity to stop by the house that went on that site, and I was amazed. I got a tour of it, and you see it there on the left and the right. It is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, almost 16 or just over 1,600 square foot slab on grade home with a 2-car attached garage, and it's amazing. And in spite of the challenges of rising construction costs, they are making it happen and already generating some interest in the home. It was the wall studs were up, so I didn't get to see everything going on, but they have been excited about the prospect of selling this home, but even more exciting, they are now sharing their story with other communities in the area, as well as going up into the Sandhills to share their investment club success and the story about how they started and the steps to take. So we are excited to bring you that update, but also just to remind you, if you want to check out that webinar from August of 2020, you can find it as well as all of our other previous webinars and today's webinar later on at our website that is mentioned there. So also, before we conclude, I want to just update you on our spring gathering, which will be June 3rd in Hastings. Registration is open, and right now it's $99. That's our early bird registration. And some of you have already registered for that. So thank you. And we hope to see you there in Hastings. If someone from your community wants to attend, finances are an issue. The Nebraska Development Network is offering up to 5 $100 scholarships for community development, housing development opportunities here in the region. So I hope that you will be joining us in June in Hastings. So Andrew, before I talk about next month, I want to just say once again, thank you for your time and your investment in what is a complex topic. I know several people mentioned they just wanted to be able to be more comfortable in articulating TIF. And so I think you've done an amazing job in giving us good factual information that they can take back to their communities. So thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Yeah, so next month, if you're looking forward to next month as we are in the process of confirming our next speaker. So while we're not prepared to tell you what that is today, rest assured it will be a great topic and a great conversation. So I hope you will make plans to join us on May 20th for our next HomeNE Learning Network webinar. So thank you once again, Andrew. Any final thoughts? Okay.
I wanted to mention that we did use this process. We're using it right now for a home that we're building with Rural Workforce Housing Funds in Blue Hill. And Andrew prepared the documents that are available for communities to use that will help you with the contracts for this very process that he spelled out today. We have those. We're glad to make those available. So let us know if you would like a copy of those.
Yeah, the hope is to make that a reproducible process. While there's still going to be, as I mentioned, there's going to be details that need to be worked out specifically, but the idea was to make it very reproducible and usable for many communities.
Perfect. And the slides from today's presentation will be made available to those who registered for today. I had a question about that. So those will be emailed out to you. Sherry is always on top of that. So with that, thank you all of you for joining us today. And once again, thank you to Andrew, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.